we're going to tell only part of Mojgan's story today. You can see that there's a book here that Mojgan wrote with her husband and with the author James Knight. And that tells like the whole story of Mojgan's life from conception and Milad's life. So from when her parents met each other and produced Mojgan, and Milad's parents met each other and produced Milad, their entire life in Iran, and then they travelled by boat to Australia and everything that's kind of happened. We're only going to tell a very small part of Mojgan's story, and there are a few reasons for that. One reason is that it's really emotional for Mojgan to talk about what had happened to her in Iran for different reasons. And the other part is that it's a really long story. And the bit that we're going to talk about it's from when Mojgan and I kind of met each other. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about that, because I think it's got some really strong messages in the context of what's happening at the moment, particularly, as Ian said, around people being able to take action and community power being able to empower others and produce really good results in some cases. So as we're talking today, and this was really brought home to me when the beautiful Maria was talking, this word freedom. In Australia, and I know in myself as a person who was born in Australia and grew up here, I never really examined that idea of freedom until recently, in a kind of, I guess, a more nuanced way. So what we'd like you to do is think about this word freedom for you in your individual context in your life, because the thing that I kind of held on to through this journey with Mojgan is this idea from Martin Luther King Jr. that it is always the right time to do what is right. For me, that's freedom for me. That I've been able to take action, and I've always been able to do what is right, and it's always the right time for me to do what is right, because I have protections and freedoms that other people don't have. So just so that you have a bit of information about the school where Mojgan spent her Year 10, 11 and some of Year 12, it's Yeronga State High School. It's a school in Brisbane. It's near Wollongabba, if you know where that is. We're what's called a Phase 2 EALD school, which means that students who are new to Australia, they go to an intensive language centre first and get some intensive English language, and then they come to Yeronga, and that place is called Milpera. And so at our school we have about 400 students who arrived within the last 3 to 5 years in Australia, and over 50% of all of our students are refugees or people seeking asylum. And our big motto, or our kind of vision for students, is that it's about our school provides quality pathways to success, with quality being doing your best, harmony, everybody getting along, and sustainability, meaning that we're looking for futures that are sustainable for our young people. And we've got this idea, our staff have this idea, we've got high expectations for students, so we believe that they can achieve everything they set out to in a context of social justice, recognising that we have to give people what they need to get to that pathway. You're not going to be able to see all of the countries there, but it gives you an idea of the diversity of our school. We've got 64 different countries of birth, and a lot of those children who are born in Australia are actually first-generation Australians. So it's very harmonious culture, and the thing that our kids have in common is that they're all different, and so it's a really vibrant and inspiring place to work. Now, just before Mojgan came to our school, we started to realise that not all students in our school community had the same freedoms. So this idea of quality pathways to success and the idea that everyone can achieve were challenged, because we started to realise that young people seeking asylum didn't have the same freedoms and the same rights as their peers. They were being prevented from accessing opportunities that other people could. And I really remember when this first started happening. So when we heard about the fact that all the young people who'd arrived seeking asylum, in the past, if they'd arrived by boat, they'd been found to be refugees, they would get the 866 permanent residency visa, and they would be treated just the same way as all the other refugees in the school. They could apply for university, they could do certificate courses while at school, they could do anything that an Australian citizen could do. But then, when the law was changed, and the young people who arrived after this magic date in August were told, nope, you can never be a permanent resident, you will only ever be a temporary resident, you will never be seen as a refugee and have permanent residency in Australia with that status, we started to see that these young people were being treated differently by universities and tertiary education. So these young people can't apply for tertiary education the same way that citizens and permanent residents can. They are seen as international students, which means if they want to go to university, it's tens of thousands of dollars to do that. And in Queensland, not a single university offers scholarships to young people in that situation. I know that universities in other states do, and I think the University of Sydney might as well. But in Queensland, they don't at all. And we were being told by immigration that some young people couldn't do a certificate course while at school. So they were being prevented from doing different subjects. And we're like, oh, this doesn't sound good, this isn't right. And it really dawned on us that we couldn't achieve that goal of quality pathways to success, because we could see that these young people, when they finished high school, they had nowhere to go. They were going to have to work as cleaners or really low-skilled jobs. Their parents, we discovered their parents could only access 6 weeks of very basic English, and that was the only education that they could access. And the most heartbreaking of all for me was young people coming to the school asking to be enrolled, but if they were over 18, immigration was saying, no, you can't enrol them. So they had nowhere to go. And we have in our school population about 50 young people who are in this situation at the moment, where they are seeking asylum. They're either in community detention with a bridging visa or the temporary protection visa, and their journey to our school is quite traumatic. So not only have they fled from the situation in the country that they were previously living in, they've had a horrific boat journey from Indonesia. Then they've ended up in Christmas Island, and then from there they've gone to community detention in a capital city somewhere, and then perhaps that was Brisbane, perhaps not. They may have been all over the country. Then they end up in Brisbane, and then they end up in our school. And I actually enrolled just yesterday, most gorgeous young man, 14-year-old boy, whose journey is what I consider the most traumatic so far. He came by boat with his family, went to Christmas Island, was sent to Nauru. His mother was very unwell, brought from Nauru to Darwin. Mother got well enough to be returned back to Nauru, had a child, became unwell again, came back to Darwin, then to Brisbane. And this young boy, he's 14 years old, and that was the last 4 years of his life that occurred. And you can just see in his eyes and in his soul how much that has impacted on him. And it's a awful thing to see, because as a teacher, when young people are abused, we report that to child safety. We can make them safe. But with these young people, we can't make them safe because it's our government that's perpetrating the abuse. And I know a lot now about visas and pathways and legal holes and all the rest of it. And the reason I know so much about all of this is because of this beautiful young woman standing beside me, Mojgan Shamsalipoor. So Mojgan, would you like to introduce yourself to the people?
Hi everyone, thank you for coming here. My name is Mojgan Shamsalipoor. I came to Australia 2012 with my oldest brother, and I lived in Australia for 2.5 years, got married, and I got re-detained again and been in detention for another 2 years, and then now I'm here.
So Mojgan and I first met in 2013. You can see some pictures of her here. Would you like to tell people about the first day that we met and your enrolment?
So before I go to Yeronga, I used to go to Milpera school. It's a second language school which you learn English. And by the time I finished Milpera, I was over 18, and my visa situation was telling me, like people were telling me I can't go to university or TAFE, and I can't go to high school because I'm over 18. Despite all of this, I tried my chance and I went to Yeronga High School. I met Miss Walker, and she knew everything but nice of her. She enrolled me, and it was the best day of my life.
So when Mojgan came, she was the first person who'd approached the school who was over 18 asking for enrolment, and I didn't know the rules at that stage, so we enrolled her. And so I afterwards, and after she'd been at our school for about a term, I let the department know that I'd made that mistake, and that and I explained that we can't penalise young people because people in positions of power in schools make silly mistakes. So they allowed her to stay, which was wonderful that she was able to stay and continue her studies. So we enrolled Mojgan into Year 10, and do you remember at the interview, Mojgan, what you thought?
So when I went to the interview, I went with one of my teachers from Milpera. She was Persian too, she could speak my language, and on that time I couldn't speak any English. So
you could speak a little bit.
So I went to Yeronga and Hoda, her name is Hoda and Miss Walker were talking. And I was like, they were talking very serious and I couldn't realize if I've been enrolled or not, if I've been rejected. And then they finished speaking and then they shake hands and then we were going and I was like, lost, what's happened? Did I enroll? And then Hoda said, why you're not happy? You got enrolled. And I couldn't believe it was a miracle for me.
So when I enrolled Mojgan, I could see, similar to the young man I just spoke to you about before, that she was shattered, that she had gone through a lot. I could see that she was traumatised by her experiences and she had a kind of haunted look about her. But I could also tell that she was very passionate about being educated. So in what English she had, that you could just see that coming out of her, that she was so determined to finish high school and she was so determined to be educated. And over time, so in year 10 was when she arrived, over time as she made friends, got involved in dance, and then that's in the drama club there she is, making friends, going on excursions, she suddenly started blossoming into this beautiful young woman who was confident and her English improved so much. And it was just a beautiful thing to see. So I could see the power of education and stability and acceptance. So it was a lovely thing. But it wasn't just due to being at school, because at around the same time, Mojgan met the love of her life. Would you like to tell people about that?
So I met my husband Milad in late 2012. We both went to the same youth camp. And I met him there and we fell in love and we were friends from 2012 till 2014 and we decided to get married. And yeah, in 2014 we got married. Yeah.
And people have said things about, they were quite young when they were married. How old were you guys when you got married?
20 years old.
20 years old. And Milad, if Mojgan hadn't been in the situation she was in, I think they probably would have waited a bit longer. But Milad really felt strongly about demonstrating with action and not just words how committed he was to Mojgan and how he would always be there for her and wanted to do anything he could to make her feel safe and secure. And so they did get married and it was a bittersweet day for Mojgan because her brother at that time, Hossein, his case had been finally determined and he was in detention. And obviously Mojgan didn't have anybody else from her family in Australia. And so while she was marrying Milad, she was really conscious of the fact that there were no witnesses from her life there to see that and celebrate that moment with her. So it was a very bittersweet day. And we're looking forward to the time when they can renew their vows, when they have friends and family can all be together around them. So Mojgan and Milad at school would be holding hands together sometimes, and I could see that that they were actually very good for each other. Milad, before he met Mojgan, was a little bit of a naughty boy. Wasn't always as serious and mature as he is now, and they had a very calming, healing, settling effect on each other. But then, at the end of 2014, Mojgan's case for asylum was rejected, and we didn't think that would happen. We knew what Mojgan's story was, and we knew what had happened to Hussein, and Hussein's circumstances are slightly different. And we had absolute faith that Mojgan's story, anyone who knows it would say, yes, this is a young woman who, is seeking asylum and is deserving of asylum. Yes, she's a refugee, she deserves to stay. So when it was rejected, we were really shocked. Our school was very, very surprised. But we thought, okay, well, maybe this is just another, step. And the next step will be that she gets accepted. They'll see the error of their ways, everything will be fine. So in the school holidays of 2014 and early 2015, Milad called me saying, can you please write a letter and organise for Mojgan to be able to come to school still, because that was at the end of year 11. And the people at the immigration detention centre could have said no, because she was over 18. They could have just said, no, you're not allowed to go to school, no, we're not letting you go. But, and this is something we've discovered in this journey, that there are good people everywhere that are parts of systems that are not good. So a good person in that system made it so that Mojgan was able to come to school still. And so every day from the beginning of 2015, she was living in the Brisbane Immigration Transit Accommodation, or BITA for short, because that's a bit of a mouthful. And every day she was coming to school with armed guard. to make sure that she didn't try and abscond on the way to and from school. And that wasn't a very nice situation. The guard was not respectful always of Mojgan. And there was one really awful situation where when you're living in detention, you're not allowed to have any money. And Mojgan and Milad have always had a sense of dignity in paying their own way. And there was an excursion coming up that Mojgan was going to go to, and she knew the school was going to pay for her, but she wanted to pay. And so Milad had given her money when he'd visited her the night before. And when Mojgan came to school that day with the money, the guard was with her, and when she went to give it to the administration area, the guard just went crazy at her, screamed at her, yelled at her in front of staff, students, parents, wanted to take her away and strip search her there and then, and was an awful behaviour. And for people in a school to be seeing that was really shocking for them. And I wanted to make a complaint about that, but Mojgan said, no, please don't, because at least I can come to school. If there's a complaint or we say anything, maybe they will stop me from coming to school. So we didn't make any complaints. But Mojgan was working really hard to try and keep up with her studies. The other thing that you can't have in detention is personal devices. You can't have a mobile phone, you can't have a laptop. So every student in our school has a school laptop that they keep with them at school and take home to work on assignments. But every day, Mojgan's laptop would be confiscated from her before she went back inside the detention centre. So she couldn't do her homework or assignments of an evening. And then when she came out, the next morning, it'd be given to her to bring in. So trying to keep up with homework and assignments was challenging. And then what happened at night in the detention centre was challenging too. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
So most of the time I couldn't sleep at night. We had the small rooms, bunk beds of 4 girls living in the same room, which it was alright, you could get used to it, but because most of the people who came who were in the detention, onshore detention, they were from Nauru or Manus. They were brought to get treated because they were sick mentally or physically, and I had experiences that I saw girls at night getting sick, very sick. They couldn't breathe, they used to scream, and it used to make me scared, and I had to be awake to look after my roommates and make sure they are right. And like middle of night or early in the morning, you could hear screams, crying. So imagine to sleep on those sort of situations.
So some days when Mojgan came to school, she was so exhausted that we would just put her in sick bay and she'd just sleep, because at least it was a safe place to sleep and to be okay. So there were all these challenges, but we still felt pretty hopeful. In fact, the day before the worst thing happened, Mojgan came to see me in my office and said, I have a really good feeling. I think I'm going to be able to stay in Brisbane until I finish Year 12 at least, because she'd been being threatened and having lots of pressure put on her to return to Iran. And they were saying things to her like, we'll transfer you to another city, you can't stay here, it's transit accommodation, people are only meant to be here for a short time. And they were changing the signage out the front of the centre, so she thought, oh, maybe it's making a long stay instead. So she came saying that she felt so hopeful, and the very next day she was forcibly transferred to Darwin. And by forcibly, I mean they used force. So Mojgan was very scared. She wanted to talk to her husband. She knew that something bad was going to happen because she was dressed for school. There are other young people in the detention centre getting ready for school. And the guards said, no one's going to school today. There's no school. And they all knew something was up, because it was around the time of the Brisbane Eka show, and kids had, permission to go to school and then go on an excursion. So everybody knew that there was something not right. So Mojgan called her husband, Milad, and said, I feel like something's not right, something bad's going to happen. And as soon as he heard that, he turned around, because he was working at the Gold Coast at that time, turned around to go back up to Brisbane to find out what was happening. And then when they came for her, they wouldn't let her call Milad again. She was panicking and very, very anxious and having a panic attack. And in that state, she was had her arms pushed behind her back. She was dragged along the dirt. Her hair was pulled up in the person's hand and ripped back, and it dragged along the ground in that manner. And the physical assault was not the worst of what had hurt for Mojgan. That was not the worst thing. The worst thing was once they dragged her into the room where she was sitting there broken and completely distraught, is the guards then gave each other high fives and what a great job we've done and well done, you know, great, we caught her and we got her and we did. And that was the thing that really hurt Mojgan, because she was being treated like a criminal and she had done nothing wrong. So that was horrible. When Milad got there, he said, can I please see my wife and calm her down? I know she's going to be terrified. And they said, no, you cannot see her, and if you don't get off the property, we're going to call the police and you'll be arrested. So he called me, really, upset, saying, what do I do? What do I do? I said, come into school. I didn't know what to do, but I said, come into school, we'll sort something out. Come into school. So that's what he did. He came into school. And when I found out that this had happened, I was in a state of disbelief. I really think up until that point, I've been a very innocent person, very innocent and naive. I believed as a teacher, and that was my calling in life, and a very naive young woman, that if you do the right thing and you follow the rules, bad things won't happen to you. Not in Australia, and that people can't abuse human rights because we're in Australia, and these things would never happen. And when I heard that this had happened, I just could not believe it. And we had a staff morning tea, and I was, obviously really upset, and I was telling staff, and none of the other staff could believe it. We're all like, what? This is ridiculous. How could this happen? What are we going to do? We have to do something. And our P&C committee had already kind of been aware of these issues around people seeking asylum, because I'd been talking about it at meetings, about, being prevented from going to excursions was another thing, that sometimes they weren't allowed to go to excursions because immigration would say no, about being prevented from accessing education. So we got in contact with them, and they too were like, no, this is revolting, this can't happen, what can we do? And when Mojgan had told me weeks before about her being fearful of being transferred or something like that, and at that stage I thought that would never happen, I said to her, Mojgan, they wouldn't dare do that. If they did that, our teachers would be out there in front of Parliament House protesting and rallying and yelling, and it wouldn't happen, it just wouldn't happen. And that was quite a prophecy, because that's exactly what happened. So we got in contact with our union, our teachers' union. Our school's a very strong union school, and I've been a member of the union since I first started teaching, in fact before I started teaching. And we said, what can we do? And they said, well, you can protest, you can do a rally, we'll support you. We will make sure you have permits, we will get you balloons, we will set up speakers, we will do whatever you want us to do. So they really came in and saved us. They gave us an outlet and empowered us. So the very first day after Mojgan was taken, there was an anti-border force rally happening, and we crashed that rally with, this is where it says we stand against the border force. And Mojgan's peers came out in droves, because if I was innocent and naive, mercy, they were babies. Like, I had at least had some idea of the things that had been happening around people seeking asylum. They had no idea. They'd been quite, the ones who weren't directly impacted by it, had no idea. So they were coming out with their family and their friends going, no, this is wrong. And then the week after that, we held another rally, which is down at Eagle Street, which is near the Parliament Houses, and there were hundreds of people there for that. And it's students and teachers and union members and all sorts. And we, very naively thought, well, we've said our piece, we've been on ABC News, the government will see the error of their ways, she'll be brought back, misunderstanding, it'll all be fine. But no, of course that did not happen. And our students felt really strongly about this. This, what has happened, changed our students' lives, particularly the students who are Mojgan's contemporaries. So the girl with the gorgeous auburn hair, Eden, she's our school captain, was her school captain in Mojgan's graduating year. And she is a completely different life trajectory now. She was going to do business or accounting when she finished high school. She's now studying journalism because she believes there are stories that people are not hearing, and she believes that journalists are not telling the stories that need to be told, and she wants to be one who does. And they were so empowered to speak out. They were there at every rally, at every march, at every public demonstration. They created all these little hearts, one for each student, saying, bring our sister Mojgan back, and planted the hearts across the road. They really got out there for saying this isn't right, and they didn't give up. They kept coming to everything. They didn't lose hope. And our teachers were also empowered to take industrial action. So after we'd done a number of rallies and marches and all the rest of it, we said to the union, what else can we do? Because this doesn't seem to be working. Can we do something that's going to, get more publicity and more people noticing us? So we took a vote to take strike action, which was kind of historic because we weren't striking against our employer. Our employer is the state government. We were striking against a human rights violation perpetrated by the federal government. But, and as such, our employer could have docked our pay, but they didn't. So we saw that as implicit support for what it was that we were doing. So we were, excited to do that, but again, it didn't get that much notice really. And we started to feel a little bit disheartened. And we're thinking, well, what else can we do? So Milad and I were going around trying to get more awareness. We had the Facebook page that we started and people started getting onto that. We started going to every rally that other people were holding. This is actually Palm Sunday down here in Sydney a couple of years ago. And we were getting out there, trying to get the message out there, and we found that more people started responding outside of the direct Brisbane community. And even this guy here's police officer, that's outside Dutton's office in Strathpine. We had this letter that we wanted to give Minister Dutton on behalf of Milad, but he was so brave, he stayed inside his office with the door locked, kind of looking out the window. And they were telling us that he wasn't there, but it was so bleeding obvious that he was there. And this police officer said, look mate, I'll take your letter in, I'll make sure he gets it. So good people were hearing about it and responding, and politicians started responding too. And we won awards for the action we were taking. Now these guys, these are both Labor politicians in Queensland. One at the top is a federal representative and the other one is a state representative. Both Labor politicians, but both have spoken in Parliament about Mojgan and advocating for her release. And Mark Bailey actually spoke in State Parliament again just on Wednesday, advocating for her to be given permanent residency, and we're seeing that's quite hopeful. Most people know the union movement and the Labor movement, are quite close to each other, and we've found lots of support from the union movement around people seeking asylum and refugees, and we're going to keep going down that track because we hope that will, result in larger change. And even this lady here, Natasha Griggs, who was a personal friend of Minister Dutton, she was the politician for Wickham Point Detention Centre, like that area in Darwin, and she spoke to him about it and put it up on Facebook, and she was a country Liberal Party member, National Liberal, something like that. So even she had a heart around this issue. And so we thought, okay, yep, we're getting all this political notice now, but still the response was, no, thank you for raising this with the Minister, he does not wish to intervene. And so when we got that news, we were feeling really, Milad and I were like, my goodness, what else can we possibly do? And Mojgan was still in Wickham Point Detention Centre. Myself and another teacher had gone up to take her work so that she could continue her studies, but we were feeling quite despondent. But Mojgan up in Wickham Point was feeling differently. So would you like to describe how you were feeling during that time?
So when I used to see all those rallies and seeing how Miss Walker and all those beautiful Australian people and my friends protesting for me, it gave me so much strength, it gave me hope to stay positive. And throughout that, I just learned something very important from Jessica, that before detention, I used to think one person can't do anything, can't make any difference. But now I believe strongly one person can do so much, and Miss Walker did that. She as an individual, she gathered all those individuals, made a strong chain, and then supported me. It made a big difference in me. And when it was happening, you can find a lot of reason to give up in detention. There is a lot of reason to give up, but I created my own reasons to not give up. And seeing people supporting me give me hope to just continue my studying. I say, no matter what, I'm gonna continue my studying and I'm gonna graduate.
And that's exactly what she did. And can you hear the sound? I don't think you can. That's okay. This is Mojgan's graduation. That's clearly not Mojgan. So Mojgan, where were you and what were you doing when this was happening?
So, in the graduation night, I was on the phone hearing, sorry, I get emotional, hearing all those sounds and everything, and it was something I always wanted. I tried for it, and it was emotional day. Like, I was very proud, I was very happy that I finished my studying and I got graduated, but in other hand, I was very upset that I can't be there with my friends. I can't accept that graduate certificate myself.
And at our awards night, Mojgan was awarded with perseverance and diligence in studies, because I think graduating from behind bars in Wickham Point Detention Centre was quite an achievement. And you know, we were so proud of her. There is a special person in this journey that we try and recognise when we talk, but we don't know his name, and we don't really know much about him. In Wickham Point Detention Centre, they had a person in there who was flown in from America to teach, to provide educational programs for adult learners. Somehow he got my number and was able to organise for Mojgan to be able to have access to the computer labs. Normally you can only have half an hour to an hour a day, and that was it. But he was able to organise for her to be in there from 9 until 5. And he was also able to somehow organise Skype so that she could see us, we couldn't see her. So we could have in the classroom, she could still see her friends and see the teacher teaching. And he was a miracle, that man. Like, we don't know who he is or where he is now, other than he was American, spoke with an American accent. But again, it was an example of people working inside a system who don't agree with it, but are finding themselves in that system and still trying to do the right thing. And I don't know if we would have had the success that we did without him. So I hope one day he gets in contact again and we can thank him in person. So after that, we were kind of like not sure where else to go, because we'd had all of these public demonstrations. I think by that stage we'd had 11 different demonstrations. And Mojgan had finished high school, and our platform had kind of been a schoolgirl, not a criminal. Save Mojgan, free Mojgan. But our school community said, well, you know what? Until she walks across the stage and gets that graduation certificate herself, she's still part of our school. She's still a schoolgirl, and we're going to continue to advocate. And then we heard news through the federal budget announcement that Wickham Point Detention Centre was going to be closed because it wasn't financially viable to keep it open. And we're like, well, what on earth is going to happen to all the people there? And then they started being transferred out to different states and different cities. And Mojgan and her brother were one of the last to be transferred out. And on the 14th of May 2016, again without any warning, without any reason giving or any of the rest of it, Mojgan was transferred back to Brisbane, this time with her brother. Which just made us think, well, why on earth did she have to go through all that she did in the first place? But as Maria said, you try and work out the reasoning, none of it makes any sense. So she was brought back. And then not long after that, Australian Story contacted the school and said, we've heard about this story about Mojgan, and we think it's a national story, and we think it's an Australian story. Mojgan's story is an Australian story. Australians are impacted by this. You have a whole community around her. You consider her to be an Australian, so we want to share her story with the country. And after this episode, there was huge national and international recognition about Mojgan, and people started saying to us, what can we do? What can we do to help? And we said, write letters to your federal ministers. Write letters to Minister Dutton. Because we'd worked out that phone calls and emails and Facebook messaging didn't really work very well, but letters seemed to get the message across, because people were getting responses and things were happening behind the scenes. And we were preparing for what our next big action would be in terms of a legal action. And then suddenly, September 2016, Mojgan was released from detention into the Brisbane community.
A young Iranian woman who spent nearly 2 years in immigration detention in Australia has been released on a bridging visa. The decision by the Immigration Minister shocked her supporters in Brisbane who've been campaigning for her freedom. Shani Kim has the story.
The road to freedom has been a painful one for Mojgan Shamsalipoor and her family. After nearly 2 years in detention, the 22-year-old walked free into the arms of her husband.
It was unbelievable. It was like a dream that every night I had dream about it.
Mojgan Shamsalipoor fled from horrific abuse in Iran 4 years ago. In Brisbane, she went to high school, found love, got married. But 2 months later, her application for refugee status was rejected and she was detained again. Her husband and old high school have been campaigning for her release ever since.
I never gave up.
She's such a beautiful person. She deserves to be free. And the happiness is indescribable.
Today there was much to celebrate, but also questions why a young woman still finishing high school had to be locked up in the first place.
What's happened with Mojgan has caused so much pain and heartache, and in my opinion, it was needless.
And although she's been released, she remains in limbo.
The Minister has not gone far enough to allow her any certainty of the future or the opportunity to live in Australia permanently.
Mojgan Shamsalipoor was one of several people released from immigration detention today. The federal government says they've been granted temporary bridging visas to reduce the number of people in detention. They are not refugees and are expected to return to their countries of origin. They will not have access to permanent stay visas. The young couple's legal team is exploring options to help Ms Shamsalipoor stay in Australia.
Yeah,
We're living at the present time.
I'm happy that I'm free and I can be with him and with my family.
For now, they're just happy to have another chance at life together.
I'm holding her hand. I can't believe this.
But their fight isn't over. Shani Kim, ABC News, Brisbane.
So that was obviously an amazing day, a really special day, and because we really were not expecting for her to be released. So that was incredible. And the other incredible thing is that Mojgan immediately wanted to give back. She said, Jess, tell me, when is the next rally? When can I go? When can I speak to the people who've supported me? Do you want to explain why that was so important to you?
So after that 2 years, seeing how many people are behind me and supporting me, I thought with myself, I can't sit home and say, okay, I'm free. I have to give back. I have to appreciate all those beautiful people who have been supporting me and letting them know how much their support impact on me and how much it made me strong to not give up. So I had to speak about my friends. I met a lot of people in detention from Nauru, from Manus, who've been tortured, and it made me so upset. I met a lot of beautiful women who had same situation as me, who couldn't stand for their right, who couldn't have voice, and I learned from Jessica that I have to stand for my right, and all those beautiful women who couldn't stand for their rights because of their culture or being ashamed. So I had to stand for their right and speak out for them.
So every rally, Mojgan's there by my side. We hold the Teachers for Refugees sign together. She gets up and speaks, and she's very passionate about being there to support those people. And since she's left detention, obviously she's written a book, and she's been studying and working. Do you want to talk about that?
So from the time I got released, I was looking for opportunity to study. Of course, I would love to go to university and study midwifery. It's my dream to become a midwife, but studying at university the costs are very expensive and I can't afford that. So I found about certificate 3 on health services. So I've done my certificate 3, and then now I'm doing certificate 3 on childcare. And I've done advanced English, and now I'm working at Yeronga once a week as I'm helping with a drama and art project research. Yeah, and I'm looking for any opportunity to work and study.
And she was able to walk across the stage and receive her high school certificate, and that was the day that she did that. So that was it was a year later that she was able to do that. So Mojgan, you can see she's very resilient, very positive person, but she's living 3 months and now 6 months at a time. And each visa that she's been given has the expectation that she will make plans to return to Iran. And each time there is pressure put on her to say, your case is finally determined, the minister isn't going to intervene, you need to make plans to return. And each time we reply and say, well, that's not going to happen because it's dangerous for Mojgan to return. She cannot return. And why would she leave her husband and her family and her community? What sense would that make? She's working here. She's paying taxes. She's part of our Australian community. Why on earth would she have to go overseas only to come back? The cost and it's ridiculous. Why would she do that? So in the submissions we've been putting to the Minister, we've been asking him not to grant her asylum, but to lift the ban that currently prevents her from applying for a partner visa onshore. So they're saying to apply for a partner visa, you need to go back to Iran and apply for it, and then, then if you're successful, you can return. But that's ridiculous and impossible. So we continue to petition the Minister to say, please lift the ban. If he wanted to, he could sign a piece of paper tomorrow that gave her permanent residency. Or he could at least allow her to apply for permanent residency as a partner of an Australian permanent resident. Milad, in really good news, Milad he's been eligible for citizenship for over a year now. We put his application in as soon as he was eligible, and just a couple of weeks ago we found out that he has a scheduled citizenship test. So that's going to be happening in a couple of weeks, and then he will become an Australian citizen. So she's married to an Australian citizen. She's made, so many friends and has so much support here. Why would she leave when, in our minds, it's just not necessary to do so? So the Minister can grant her the ability to apply for a partner visa onshore if he believes it's in the public interest to do so. And so that's part of us talking about her story and telling people about it, because we believe that compassionate Australians with good sense recognise that it's silly for her to go offshore to apply when she could just do it here. So often we get asked what next for... Oh, actually, no, we'll go with some first. So we'll go back to freedom. So I've shared with you what my thoughts are around freedom and how I feel that it is always the right time to do what is right. That's how I can appreciate, respect my freedom. Mojgan, would you like to share what your idea of freedom is?
So freedom for me is a feeling in your heart. I always get emotional when I talk about freedom. So it happens when your heart and face smiles at the same time. It happens when you have peace of mind. It happens when you're hopeful, almost certain of a bright future, and when you can freely help others and support people.
And so we would ask you to think about today, as you go from here, after you've heard the stories of these two very inspirational and passionate young people with so much to give, what does your freedom mean to you? What are you going to do with your freedom in the future?